At the time that I'm recording this video, the world in general is at the crossroads of a very weird financial state, and video games specifically are unusually close to the epicenter of all these real-world financial problems. Actually, unusual is the wrong word to use. I retract that statement. I almost forgot which paid vertical stand hobby I was talking about for a second. The cherry on top of every other money issue in the world right now is being topped off with the issues that we're having in gaming that we just got in these last 2 weeks, with all these different price hikes, the attempts at price gouges. You got classic, just stupid fucking pricing. And I'll spare you the details of me going NBA Jam hard in the paint for every pricing going on right now, since it's all still an open, uncertain wound. But with everything going on right now and happening all at once, these factors are undoubtedly the main catalyst behind just opening up Pandora's box of pricing out many casual gamers by the motherload in these next couple of years with these sudden new price hikes. And if that's you, or at least a mindset that you're starting to have, I respect it, but as you walk out that hypothetical door of gaming and leave what it all has to offer behind you, I just ask that you give me one more cinematic turnaround and allow me to show you a whole new world of gaming that will undoubtedly reach a whole new renaissance at the peak of all these new pricing issues of AAA gaming being independent developed games. Now, indie games, or games developed by small or even solo teams that aren't backed by any of these big name publishers that you might be thinking of right now, isn't some new game-changing Pokemon that we just haven't seen in the field before, because when it comes down to it, indie games have been there literally since the start of this hobby, before there were even companies that published these games. And in recent decades, some games have breached the mainstream light by being among the majority of players' favorites, with some games with their simplistic charms with titles like Balatro, or even games that make you question your sanity with this difficulty with titles like Cuphead. Practically anyone has access to creating a game, so it's important to understand that most games that are out in the world right now are actually indie developed when you count all the mobile titles and all the games that aren't on the front page of your local game browser. So you just have so much more option than what you might be used to. But at the end of the day, even though most of the world plays games now in some capacity, most people still aren't gamers in the sense of not playing just surface level titles that you might just see at the front kiosk of your local Walmart or Target or something. Discoverability is the biggest issue of indie gaming, since, like we already established, they don't have the backing of a big publisher to get their games out to as many eyes as possible. But thanks to factors such as social media now, a lot of these new games still find ways to break ground in times like these, when AAA gaming, or at least the whole thought of it, is becoming more of a turnoff to modern players, to which indie games, they usually have these AAA titles beat in pricing and a bunch of other experiences that you just aren't getting in a lot of these big budget titles. That I think is one of the many reasons as to why you should consider just letting indie games save you in this time where gaming is dying. So one thing that I think every game developer and publisher has had at some point down the line before going down the route of becoming successful and joining this silent arms race of acquiring every developer team ever is the passion and desire to create the best experience possible in a video game, which you definitely see in most of these indie titles, since for a lot of them, this is their ground zero where they just have the entire world in their hands. Because when you peel back the curtain on game development, creating a game is one of the most complex things that a human can do, as these things take months to years of your time, an extensive amount of money, not to mention, like I already said, this is the pressure that a small team, or in most cases a solo dev, has to endure. So they usually have this hunger about them to create the best experience possible and make all their time being worthwhile. So with that, you'll find that a lot of these indie games just have a lot of heart and soul poured into them, as having these smaller or even solo teams with one focal point vision allows for that vision to be seen much more at the output of their work being in the gameplay. It just leads the way to create some insane ideas, as we have just an insane talent pool at a moment's notice. But hopefully those ideas are actually original and not the Legend of Babu, which I feel like just saying its name disrespects Zelda's entire existence. And even though finding indie games can sometimes be a complicated thing, contributors like the Xbox Game Pass with a shit ton of indie games on there, or even just the way that Steam's marketplace is set up on its front page, your game will likely get in the hands of some players. And one of the advantages of having a smaller game that big name studios might not directly have is just having that direct connection with the audience and being able to see what exactly they're saying, not all at once or in insane waves during a live stream that you can use to pivot your next move when it comes to developing that title. So the desire to stand out is at an all-time high right now, which I believe that many indie games do have, as you reach a point where creativity and just the amount of things that you have at your disposal to create games is at an all-time high. But one way that indie games might not stand out, at least to the modern player, that can be that bad thing, or at least in my opinion can be a good thing, is the fact that graphically speaking, a lot of these indie games just aren't that powerful. And even though that might suck in the current world of 4K RTX resolutions, that usually means that these games can be ran on pretty much anything possible. Because don't get me wrong, the age of new graphics and insane developments in technology is really exciting to see, but when it comes down to it, most players just either can't afford the new shit coming out, or they really just don't care that much anymore, as a lot of these new games coming out with the latest ultra specs find themselves to be like modern physical titles in the sense of having a really cool case on the outside, but not shit worthwhile on the inside. So indie games, while they do have the reputation of being these 8, 16-bit or even standstill RPG type games, at least one thing you can check off your worry list is having to go to a website to see if your PC can run that title, or having to worry about a game just having pop-up textures like freaking Pokemon Violet back in 2022. Still haven't got over that. Small budget indie games usually don't have access to the latest top of the line hardware to create some of these graphically intense titles, or even if they do, they usually don't have the experience and the worthwhile to thumb through all these different glitches that comes with this new hardware while trying to make an experience that, like I said, they're trying to make as good as possible. So even though that can be a hindrance for many modern gamers that pay insane amounts of money to get the best experience when looking at their games, it still really comes down to the fact that if the game is fun at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter exactly what it looks like, which a lot of these indie games just have that factor going on to them at the fullest extent. And then, moving on to probably the most enticing reason to play indie games, at least in the current state of things right now, is the overall pricing that is almost always beating the ass of modern big budget titles nowadays. Now, generally speaking, across the board, I can't act like every indie game out there is priced respectfully or even at prices that I feel comfortable paying myself, because my Steam wishlist hasn't been touched since last September. But just with my personal experiences, or even with what I've seen on the internet with the general consensus of gamers, many indie games feel worthwhile of their lesser price tag compared to the full price model of the current gaming industry. And gamers sometimes feel they're getting a steal of a price tag after the overall fun they have when it's all said and done. Because since the average player is taking a gamble on these indie titles, a lot of these developers don't feel bold enough to charge anything egregious for these games, or prices that they don't feel is worth the overall experience you'll have after playing these games. And hell, a lot of these games might even be free or even have a demo that shows you the gist of what the game is trying to go for. Like, on the surface level, I can't act like paying $25 for the 2024 pixel puzzle game Animal Well is worth it for what you're seeing, at least in the screenshots of the game store page. But if you check the reviews, or even take my word for it and me saying that this is one of the coolest puzzle games that's come out in recent years, you would see that the overall consensus is that this game is really good for the price tag. A feeling that many players just haven't felt in a long time after playing these big budget titles with all these big budget price tags. But to leave margin for whatever the hell might happen going forward financially speaking, with the cost of everything in the world going up, we might see these $10, $15 indie games might go up in price tag and start asking for a little more. But I would still argue that even then, they would still be less than the modern big game and still have much more value based on even those more price tags in this sense, because I now just can't guarantee that you'll have more fun with the expensive title compared to one that's only a quarter of its price tag. And then lastly, and obviously the most important reason to play indie games or just games themselves, which I'm sure you probably saw coming of me talking about it because I talked around it for the entire video, is because the shit is just fun, man. Indie games are usually just much more fun to just pick up and play, and being the base of what a video game just is. I really just think that it comes back to the argument that once some game developer or publisher reaches this level of success and having now to meet budgets and just all these new factors that take away the main focus of what everything should be, and that's just making this game as fun as possible, indie games, their main goal is everything usually but that, and just having the most base fun in the game that they can create. Because dude, I just can't tell you how many times I've ever deep dived into a solo developer or a small indie team and seen how they've said they were inspired by some of the games of their childhood with titles like in the N64 or original PlayStation days, where those games aim to be as fun as possible with no other motive, except maybe turning players mentally unstable with those dual shocks with no joysticks on the PS1. Having that kind of background as indie developers just shows the way that they're trying to pivot gaming back to what it should always be, and that's just simple fun when you pick up a title, to which you usually find that in a lot of these simple, just light-hearted games that they're developing all the time. Like most of the gaming world right now is just captured by the drug dealing game of Schedule 1, to which this game, even with its low graphics, is extremely fun to watch and play with its insanely detailed gameplay, and fun of just mixing random substances and watching these character models just whiz the hell out. Like, I don't see how big name publishers are seeing titles like Schedule 1 blow up and just overtake player counts of some of these biggest games out there and not try to replicate that, and instead replicate every other game they've already made before, just now add new DLC and paid content to make it even more of a watered down experience. So even though indie games might not have the most financial freedom to create the best experience that they can at that time, what's fun will always prevail, and that will definitely be the case in the next generation as we look for more of an escape from the current regime of modern gaming. And that's all I got for today, man. If you enjoyed, leave a like on the video, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.